We're going to get a light that's just a ray of sunshine for Todd every now and then, just to flip it on, let it shine on him.
Here's my sunshine. So. Welcome back to Sermon Rewind. My name is Todd, and with me is Jordan, whether he wants to be or not.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you.
How you doing?
Doing well, man.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. New series.
Advent season.
Yeah. And we will come to that. Thank you for that's going to be a little segue later on.
Okay.
What are you waiting for? Is the series, I assume, because that's the smaller font at the top of the
You got
outline,
it right.
Okay.
Bravo, Todd.
The sermon title was "What Are You Hoping For?"
Mm-hmm.
And the main text was Isaiah 40, verses 1 through 11. And the facilitator of the sermon was the man, the myth, the legend, Reverend Jordan Hall.
Myself.
Big idea. The coming of Jesus proves that our longings are too small. So far, so good?
You got it.
Okay. Let's start with that. Are we pitiful, sinful people even capable of an appropriate level of longing anyway? Of course they're too small.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a point where you would say, yeah, I think the people of God have a appropriate level of longing? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, man, I'm trying to bounce back from even the way you asked it. Just the tone was perfect. It was dreary.
Well, it wasn't dreary, but it's the type of thing where you say, yeah, okay, of course our longings are too small. We're sinners, right? We're human.
Sure.
Could we at any point say, I have an abundance of longing for Jesus that is biblical, admirable, and of course I don't understand, right? I don't have enough.
Yeah. No, this wasn't but that wasn't a question meant to sort of gauge where people were at so that they could reflect on their inability to do something. That was a question that was meant to gauge where people are at so that there would be a desire to yearn for more, right?
Okay.
It's just like I used the analogy early on in the sermon about, my brother and I as little kids and that space of the few hours in between dusk and dawn on Christmas Eve when your mind is just spinning. What could possibly be next, right? What could top what we just experienced? And that's essentially the whole of the Christmas story throughout the Old and New Testament. So the leading in from the Old Testament Hebrew people all the way into the shepherds and Mary and Joseph and the wise men, all this. It's all around this increased and ever, budding anticipation because there's so much happening around them telling them that something incredible is about to take place.
So let me redirect the question then. So are you suggesting that you're just not seeing enough excitement? Again, the analogy of you and your brother, and I know the same analogy because this was me as a child as well,
yeah.
Right? So excited.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Are you not seeing that?
I don't know if it's an issue of whether or not I'm seeing it or not. It is putting it out there for people to reflect upon themselves, right? Like if you're preparing this year, right, to bring out, it's post Thanksgiving, you're going to go into the attic and you're bringing down all the decorations that you used last year and you kept the ones that were still good. You threw away the ones that were broken. There's a bit of a repetitive nature to this, right? We get really used to sort of getting into this rut and just kind of living through it. We know what happens after we get past, Turkey Day. We know that we have this many days until the next big event and we have to prep for it. My hope is that followers of Jesus would say, I don't totally want to get stuck in that rut. I don't want to just exist on an annual basis getting moderately excited because the season brings all these other wonderful things: family, friends, good food, good classical music, fill in a number of blanks, right? My hope is that Advent would be a constant rekindling of a fire in our bellies that says, oh my goodness, the Savior of the world came and is coming again. And I'm having this great privilege to know and to look forward to. And what does it look like for me to believe and to hope in the things that are promised? Like that's it for me, is I want our people to just regularly look in the mirror and say, I don't have enough. It's not enough. I want more of him. I want more jubilation. I want more excitement. I want that fire to stay lit in me, even if it's been 70 years of doing this, right? So that's what it is for me. It's a helping folks reframe in something that they could easily go on autopilot and just coast right through.
Sure, and I get all that, but part of the reason that I'm sort of pressing you on it is your big idea was the coming of Jesus proves that our longings are too small.
Yeah.
That to me suggests, hey, I'm just not seeing a lot of excitement out there. I'm seeing a lot of people in ruts.
Sure.
People that aren't really into this as much as they should.
Yeah.
Are maybe focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay to say that. I know, I always put you on a spot and I say, hey, tell me about this congregation that you are seeking to lead.
Right.
That I'm kind of just giving you a runway to just throw right under the bus. Right.
Sure.
And that's not necessarily the goal, but that's a strong statement. It's basically saying, you know what? We all know what's coming, but sort of you people are sort of meh about it.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm seeing.
And that's a fair assessment. And maybe I would say I'm ticked off to this, or I'm clued in because I'm seeing it myself. So my assumption is I can't be the only one. And I look around and I say, yeah, we're all in a place together. But at the end of the day, who cares what your pastor thinks about what he sees in you? At the end of the day, Todd Pfeiffer has to get up in the morning and say, Lord Jesus, today is the day you have all of me again, right? So you have a relationship with him. You're kind of walking this out in yourself. So I'm making a statement that I know is true for me, and I can venture a guess, because it's just the way that many of us are, that is probably the same for all of us. So it's just an opportunity to kind of lob it up in the air and say, let's all go for it. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I care what my pastor thinks.
And that's fine.
At least
to a degree.
at least sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
Okay.
it goes your way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. We'll come back to the times where I disagree with you, but that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. I want to move on to point number 1, which was, and this is from Isaiah 40, verses 1 and 2. Do you hope for the end of sin and suffering for all?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is one of those questions that you should just get a bunch of nods and amens, right? Okay.
I think so.
You should. But I guess the question would be, do you anticipate or do you assume that there are some people that don't? If they were honest, do they just say, no, I really don't? There's a certain amount of sin and suffering in the world. It's what it is. I can't do anything about it. So I'm not going to hope for the end of that.
Yeah.
Do you think that if we really, again, all lie detector tests across the board, are there people that would say, yeah, no, I'm not that worried about that. I'm okay. I'm in a good place. Be great if other people, sure, but I'm not gonna stress about that.
I don't think anybody's going to say it out loud, but I think there are a lot of people that feel that way, right? I think there is an incredible internal focus and interest on my relationship with the Lord, my being forgiven from sin, my potential future inheritance of heaven. And we don't look at the bigger picture very often. I just think that's human nature, right? So when I'm stating kind of a bigger question, do you hope for the end of sin and suffering for all? It's allowing Christians to slow down for a moment and say, this baby that comes in the manger is the initiation of a revolution to redeem everything. Think of the worst examples of everything, right? Not just my little corner of the world, not just my little petty or not so petty sins, but everything that is wrong. A global sex trade, gone. The eradication of homelessness and disease and abuse of various kinds between men, women, and children. The abolishing of class systems, right? Racial discrepancies, all of this stuff gone. Do we imagine it like that? When you hear the story all over again, when you sing the songs, you gather on a Sunday morning and you recite prayers and you envision, starry nights with shepherds kind of swooning over this feeding trough. Is that what you're seeing? Is your heart leaping out of your chest for that, the end of all of that? And I don't think we go there very often. This is why I say a lot that I think that the Christian imagination is a hot mess. And if anything, it's a bit of a joke. We don't sit back and spend much time dreaming up these huge dreams of what it could possibly be like if all of this was gone. And there was only peace and only justice and only equity and only harmony and only life and life to its full. I want to set the stage for Christians to think about how remarkable this story is again. And I think that's the only way you can keep people from just saying, well, I got to put up the tree next week and I got to hang the lights and, we're going to have the grandkids over and we're going to have my neighbors over. Like, all those things are fine. They're only fine, however, in light of the fact that the Redeemer came to set the world free. And I think we miss one for the other way too often.
So I want to sort of transition to your second point, because you said, do you hope for a life filled with mercy and miracles for all? And that's from Isaiah 43, verses 3-5. Similar theme,
Sure.
right? Again, big imagination.
Yep.
Right? What is our role? Because again, you're going to have people that will say, oh, of course I dream about that. Of course I think about that, right? Are we supposed to do anything about this? Because,
Sure.
and I know, again, and I'll come back to the other end of this, it's not necessarily about the work. We don't necessarily pat ourselves on the back if we work towards some, you talked about sex trafficking and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You could spend your whole life working on just that
Sure.
issue, right? Intervention, awareness, organizations that address this, all this kind of thing. What is our role to answer these questions?
Yeah.
Can it just be imagination? Because you've sat in settings, I'm sure, as have I, where people do a bunch of talking.
Yeah.
Talk is cheap, right? People sit around, they go, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could just do this? And everybody nods and everybody goes, yeah, that would be fantastic. Okay, time to go.
Yeah.
And then you just walk away, right? So how do we balance that? Our thoughts, a mindset, an explosion of our imagination with getting going, right? And actually working towards things.
Right. I would probably have said this a lot as a teenager because I think I had more guts back then. But I would say, think of the most impossible thing. The thing that everything in your bones says that can't happen. That person cannot, be forgiven. That person will never turn their life around. That situation could never be any different. Stage 4 cancer, those people are as good as gone. And pray and act like you believe otherwise. And it really is that simple of an approach to things, right? I can't tell you how many countless prayer meetings I sit in where people pray these prayers that are safe because either they don't want to be disappointed with the outcome or they're afraid that maybe they're overstepping their boundaries when they're asking for certain things. Praying for people that are sick and saying, oh, we would love healing, but your will be done. And if this just means that you're not going to heal them in this, that doesn't mean that what you're saying isn't true, but it shows a semblance of fear or trepidation, not believing that these things are even possible. And I'll never forget, as a teenager, at 16 years old, when Jesus got a hold of my heart, I would say both the most obnoxious, but I think important season of my life was all I could see was that something unique had changed in me that I never thought possible. And everyone I came into contact with needed to know that too. And so it was almost laughable. I would, and I'm not saying this boastfully, but like I'd go to church on Sunday morning and I'd leave a little early and I'd pull over on the side of the road at a bus stop and I'd see someone sitting there and I'd invite them to come to church with me. And if they were like, well, no, I'm okay, weird teenage boy, like I'm fine. Then I'd, maybe offer to take them to lunch. I would sort of do whatever I could because I believed that Jesus could, if he could do it in me, he can do it in this person. Like there's just absolutely nothing that's impossible at this point. And I think over time we lose that. That just goes away. That just fades out and disappears. We would look at something like what's happening in the Ukraine and we could say, oh man, thank God for diplomacy. I'm sure over time we'll be able to sign enough documents and shake enough hands and everything will eventually smooth out. But what about the people that just get on their knees day and night and say, oh Lord, send a revival through one cabinet, one dictator, one general after another until ultimately peace reigns over there? Does it seem possible? In a human standpoint? Of course not. But we believe that this coming baby in the manger means that nothing is impossible. If God can take on the form of a human being, if he can breathe and need food and wet his diaper and need to be taken care of, if that can happen so that all human beings can experience the life that God has in store for them, then anything is possible. And the Christian is the most free person in the world to venture into those waters. So I would say from a practical standpoint, the response is Answer that question. What is the most impossible thing? And then pray and act like you believe otherwise. And I think if that was the case, I would start not just saying on Sunday morning, so-and-so saying like, hey, here's my nephew. He's never been to church before. He thinks this is nonsense, but he agreed to come with me. And oh, by the way, this is the neighbor I've been praying for 6 months. And I went over and I kept knocking on the door and I kept bringing him meals. And you'll see more of that when people get over this benchmark and say, yeah, I know it's impossible, but I really, really believe that Jesus can do anything.
Okay, but how do we balance then believing Jesus can versus Jesus will? Because you talked about sort of framing the will of God as fear sometimes, right?
Sure.
Bracing for disappointment.
Yeah. We utilize it as such.
We can.
Yeah.
But can we also not just recognize? I mean, is that not an act of humility without knowing? I mean, we can sit there and go, I know he could do this.
Right.
I hope he does.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that is just not God's plan. Maybe that's my plan. Maybe even if I think my intentions are pure, which they're not.
Sure.
This is just not the way that God is going to unfold his plan, right? How do we sort of go with that? Because, I mean, you made it personal. You said, maybe this is me. Maybe this is me expressing, which you've said in a number of sermons.
Yeah.
You've just sort of said, look, I'm talking about stuff that I'm terrible at, right? Mm-hmm. And you've admitted that. And that's a good thing because that's transparency, right? Mm-hmm. People appreciate that. Shameless self-promotion. You know, I just finished a book.
Yep.
I would love for that book to be a catalyst for the church unifying, dialoguing, growing together, being more effective as the universal church. I genuinely would, right? I feel pretty good about my intentions not being that I want to be rich and famous and have a best-selling book. I genuinely want this to be a catalyst for change.
Good.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This may
I'll buy it then, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thanks. That's one coffee. Mm-hmm. This genuinely may be a exercise in humility for me. God may simply say, hey, look, I just want you to do this as an act of worship to me.
Yeah.
I want to keep you humble. I'm not going to use you this way. I'm going to use you other ways. You're going to pursue this. I could do this. I'm not gonna.
Yep.
Now, it may take me a little while to figure that out, right? But just like any other thing that you're talking about, right? Sex trafficking, ending hunger, whatever it is. We'll pick all the different stuff that you've preached about in the last sermon.
Fair enough.
And say, God could end all this stuff right now.
Yeah.
And maybe we're going to make some really cool, measurable progress on this particular issue in the next year, 5, 10, whatever, during my lifetime.
Yeah.
But don't I also have to sort of step back and say, whoa, whose plan? Whose plan? Is it my plan, my vision, my hopes? Or do I have to always say, hey, look, I prayed fervently for this person to be healed?
Mm-hmm.
You know, a child. You know, this congregation has prayed fervently for children to heal.
Yeah.
And God took them.
Right.
And that was God's plan.
Yeah.
And we can say that. It hurts.
Sure.
And I have no doubt that there was fervent prayer. So is it really self-defeat? Is it really kind of bracing for disappointment if we say, well, but your will be done? Or is it recognition that we're not in charge of the hope?
Yeah. That's a really, what an amazing thing to say, and complex as all get out. However, it's a really easy thing to decipher. You pray until an outcome comes to be. Spending any amount of time and energy saying, well, should I figure out if this is his will or not first? Should I, spend a lot of time and energy on the what ifs and the maybes? I don't think that we should. It's none of our business, really, what God ultimately decides to do with anyone or anything. Our job is to take commands very seriously and behave like we believe that he can do those things, and then run until we run out of breath and gas, right? If he decides to heal people, that's for his glory and his glory alone. But you don't take your foot off the gas until he reveals one way or another. So when people say, I'm apprehensive to start pursuing peace or justice or salvation or praying or behaviors that lead to, beautiful, lovely, life-giving things in people's lives until I know, or until I can rationalize whether or not it's my will or his will, you'll spend the rest of your life sitting on a hill all by yourself. In fact, you'll probably end up being like Jonah, sitting there complaining why something didn't happen instead of spending your life wringing it out for the kingdom that you long for.
Okay, I get what you're saying about that, but I'm saying, shouldn't those go sort of hand in hand? Shouldn't it go simultaneously?
No.
I'm doing the work. I'm pursuing this hope.
Yep.
I always, at least for me, try to include your will be done.
Sure.
And please, giant sign, direct me the other way if I'm supposed to go that way.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get lost in my own sense, because I can convince myself really easily, as can you. This is a good thing. Yeah. This is a good pursuit, right? This is for the kingdom. I'm going to go that way, 90 miles an hour, and make sure this gets done, right? Because I know that God can do this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he can. But maybe he wants somebody else to do it.
Then he'll stop you and he'll replace you with that other person.
He may.
Yeah.
All right. We could keep going on this, but I got one more point I want to get to. Third point, do you hope for the promises of God to last forever? I thought about asking this question. This is a big can of worms and a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I'll ask it anyway. You mentioned season, right? We could unpack all sorts of cultural narratives about history and Christmas trees and candles and symbology and all sorts of things, whether or not it's appropriate for us to line everything up together.
Or if it's worth it.
If it's worth it, right? Should Advent be a season? Because there is, again, we're linear people, right? We like calendars.
Yeah.
We anticipate a date. Once a date is reached, we then move on to something else.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And we can get lost, right? Again, in the cultural pieces of things. We can wrap Jesus around the Christmas tree, sit him next to Santa Claus, and make it kind of a whole thing. Jesus may have been born at a different time of the year, something like that.
Yeah.
Should we rethink so our mindset is less about a calendar and parties and trying to sort of fit Jesus into a bunch of stuff that is honestly cultural, right? There's a lot of just cultural things we do, right?
For sure.
In this season, right? Should the church, this is a really giant question, but I'll ask you to answer it short.
Right.
Should they take Advent? Should they advocate for Advent to kind of just be put somewhere else, right? In a different part of the year where we can just say, we're just going to focus on Jesus' coming. No presents and parties and songs and decorations or whatever to distract us. Just Jesus. Just a sense of longing for.
That would be great. But I don't think, listen, you move it to another time of year, you build new culture around it, you build new traditions around it. It just changes. It's human nature to build things that matter to them as monuments to those things that matter most, right? So it wouldn't matter where you move it around. Advent really is happening 24/7, 365 days a year for the believer. We're always sort of sitting on the head of the needle, looking forward to what is soon and coming, right? That's just a part of who we are, and it's going to be that way until Christ comes and rules and reigns forever. However, I do think that there is value to intervals. And, I probably didn't always feel this way, like in the same way that you'd tell somebody you shouldn't do leg day every day at the gym forever. Eventually you're going to be imbalanced. Your body is not going to look very good. And frankly, you're going to wear out and crash and burn. So there is something to be said about healthy intervals. And so I get the rhythms of calendars in life. I think seasons are created, right, in creation, and it causes us to change and to think and to feel at different times. So I don't think there's anything so wrong with that. You hit the nail on the head when you talk about traditions trumping transformation, right? That we're more passionate about the events, the days, the holiday feel, the nostalgia, the meals, all that stuff than we are about looking in the mirror thinking deeply about the coming of Christ and sort of in new ways, leveraging all of ourselves back into the story again. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen. There are people that are going to be watching this video and saying, but that's really how I feel. And to that end, I would say, brother or sister, praise the Lord. What a gift that you get to feel that, right? Because we don't do that naturally. But we are inundated with a society that is constantly sort of moving the Christian and everybody else away from the kind of foundational truth about why we do this in the first place, right? Advent is now it's almost like a secularized thing, and I hate to use that term, but it's any and everybody celebrate it, and it means completely different things now. And the more widespread that happens, the further the generations get away from Jesus and his return, the church just suffers in the long run. And so, yeah, I get it. Intervals, I think, are fine and great and useful. And like I said, I don't know that we could move anything around and it would be better. I think ultimately we would just have the same problem wherever we landed.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks again for joining us on Sermon Rewind. We'd love to have you join us at Bethany during this Advent season, Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Bring a friend, bring a neighbor, and we hope that you continue to have a sense of longing for our coming Savior. Thanks again for watching.
We'll see you soon.